this working? Oh, it is. Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Before we get started today, and as the last couple of people are finding their seats, I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement. So I want to appreciate the land on which we are gathered here today. This is Treaty 6 territory, and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4 territory, and a traditional meeting ground and traveling route for many Indigenous peoples who continue to thrive on this land. And I hope that this acknowledgement does not only serve as a routine task to ease our minds, but instead serves as a reminder that real reconciliation demands concrete action and truth. So thank you all for joining us here today to discuss how the search for AI talent is evolving, and what challenges face the current AI ecosystem. So as Steph mentioned, I am Jill Kowalczyk. I'm going to be moderating this panel. I'm the K-12 education advisor here at Amii. I was a former teacher. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Alberta studying curriculum and pedagogy. But enough about me. I want to introduce our esteemed panelists, or have them rather introduce themselves. So could you please share with us your name, your organization, your position, and what it is you do? So Ian, if we can start with you, that'd be great.
Yeah, happy to. Good morning, everyone. My name's Ian Hargraves. I'm a data science fellow at ATB Financial. We're a financial services company at Crown Corporation, just over there, or where our offices are just down the street. As a data science fellow, I joined as a data scientist very early on in our data science journey, and I've had a chance to be a part of the growth and energy at ATB Financial. So I've seen us try out a lot of different business models and really come a long way. I get the privilege of doing a lot of research in my current role and helping to guide some of the strategic vision around where AI is going. But in a past life, I actually did a PhD in cognitive neuroscience at the University of Calgary. So I was studying the brains of competitive Scrabble players, trying to understand neural plasticity and different computational models of neural plasticity. Lifetimes ago.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
Awesome. And before I introduce myself, thanks for having me here today, Amy and Jill. It's my pleasure to be on the panel. My name is Adam Asquini. I'm a Director of Information Management, Data and Analytics at KPMG Canada. KPMG is a global professional services firm. We have about 250,000 employees globally, 10,000 in Canada. And in our advisory branch, we offer the full suite of capabilities to help companies through digital transformation. My role mainly focuses on data and analytics and advising organizations through those types of projects. So that's sort of what I do. I have a very sort of non-traditional path to get to where I've come from. So I actually started my career in the Canadian Armed Forces. I was a signals officer. Signals officers are responsible for planning and managing all of the communication systems for the Army that let people communicate. So everything from radios, IT, telecommunication, satellites, those types of systems that let people talk to each other. I had a 14-year military career. I then moved over to the provincial government here in Alberta, where I was a program manager, sort of responsible for leading some cross-government IT transformation initiatives. At the time, the government was centralizing its IT services. So I did that for 3 years, and then I was at AltaML for 3 years. I started as a project manager leading AI engagements, and then moved up to become the Vice President of Customer Solutions, overseeing delivery, account management, and resource management for their active accounts, and joined KPMG a few months ago.
Great. Hi, my name is Chris Henderson. I'm the Chief Strategist and Founding Partner of Y-Station Communications and Research. We are a local professional services firm with about 12 employees. And our company is, the focus of our company is a bit of a unique combination of, like it says in the title, communications and research. We use data, we use participant feedback, we use background research, we use any input that we can find to help our clients make critical decisions about their organizations and their businesses. We do a lot of public engagement. How I came to be, I started the company, so that's how I came to be a part of that company. But I started in I started a career in student politics and running student campaigns for free, obviously, as a volunteer, and that led to a larger political career. I ended up working at a PR firm called Calder Bateman, and then Calder Bateman became another company, and I started Y Station as a result. So most of my work is focused on some form of public engagement, strategic planning, or crisis communications, anything you need to do where you need to get information and put it all together and then develop and synthesize insights as a result, and then give your clients, like, here are your options, here's the things that you need to consider when you're making a big decision, like what you're going to be doing or focusing on for the next 5 years.
Wow, thank you. Such diverse experiences and backgrounds on this stage, and I feel privileged to be able to be on the stage with you all here today. So let's jump right into the conversation with my first question, which is kind of a two-part question for each of you. So could you each please share your perspectives on how the demand for AI talent has evolved, as well as you look to build AI talent in your organization? What is it that you're looking for now? So Ian, if you'd like to start, that'd be great.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I was the first person at ATB Financial with the title data scientist, but as a financial services company, they had people with PhDs in economics, advanced degrees in statistics for years and years, building models to do things like decide what is the safe amount of credit to give someone, or to detect instances of fraud, to assist marketing teams in identifying what clients are going to find interesting in terms of different offers. And so, joining the organization at that time, really the mission was to sort of explore the idea of data science as something that can add value above and beyond the traditional business model of banking. And what I would say is, back then, it was really a unicorn position because no one knew what it was or where it fit. And you really did need a little bit of everything. You needed to be a bit of an educator, an evangelist. You needed to be able to sort of communicate and sell ideas. You needed a heavy dash of product management. You needed to understand data infrastructure and toolkits. You needed a heavy ability to work with whatever toolkits were available. And then you also needed to know a lot about statistics. And hey, if you could code, that was a bonus. And so, I think particularly early on, a lot of organizations struggled to find a person who could do all of those things. And certainly, for the data scientists who were joining organizations, that meant you had to wear a lot of hats or figure out where you were good at, things you were good at, and what you weren't good at, and where you could get the help you needed. I think the biggest change that I've seen over the last few years is sort of an acknowledgement that unicorn is a bit of a myth, and that what we can do is actually build effective data science teams. So from a data scientist now, if you go to ATB Financial, we really have a much more clear role about the exact set of technical and professional skills we're looking for. We're looking for someone who can interrogate a business problem, who can work with it in order to frame and test a hypothesis, and who has the right scientific and technological toolkit to do that. But we're going to back them and support them with individuals who are experts in software development, right, who can help them stand up the right pipelines they need. We're going to support them with a platforms team who can give them the right environments to work with. We're going to back them with a product manager who is familiar with AI products and the complexities of reasoning through AI products and working with a diverse network of stakeholders. And so you can see we've sort of taken that unicorn and built a team out of it. And out of that come, I think, an opportunity to lead really different, exciting careers and to pull together really diverse perspectives around whatever problem we're trying to tackle for the business.
Thank you. Adam, I'm wondering if you share the unicorn metaphor that Ian just shared with us, or if you have a different perspective. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Ian said. In my experience, sort of what I observed over the last few years for the demand for AI talent, I'd almost describe it kind of like a slinky, something that really compressed and then relaxed and expanded. So 3 to 4 years ago, there was an extreme shortage of AI talent overall. There was also a lot of investment coming into AI companies, AI startups, as well as large organizations, the Facebooks and the Googles of the world. And so there was this sort of like talent war that was going on. And for a while, I would say it really peaked in the summer of 2021. it was very difficult to attract and retain AI talent. If you did pull in high-quality talent, there were always a threat that someone would come in and try and scoop them up for higher pay or some other perk that other companies were offering. So it became very difficult to attract AI talent for a while. The last 12 months, that seems to have slowed down. There's been a bit of a correction. I still think, though, that there's a lot of demand for high-quality AI talent and skills. To go back to the unicorn analogy, I definitely observed that as well. When I started at AltaML, it was sort of under the nexus of creating a delivery capability for the first time. That sort of echoes what Ian was saying on the data science team concept and the cross-functional aspect of it. Working with clients, we saw a lot of, sort of at that point in time, a lot of experimentation going on, which would put more emphasis on certain types of skills. But over the last 3 or 4 years, really seeing a lot more emphasis on deploying and operationalizing AI systems, which brings a lot of demand for new skill sets. So everything from data engineering and building the pipelines, the actual model development itself, product management, UI, UX, business analysis. There's now a demand for all kinds of different skills to support a complex AI system. So I think that will continue to evolve as the capability in the industry matures. But definitely are seeing that, and that I think is really exciting to see that broader skill set and the adoption and implementation of these systems in business.
Chris?
Yeah, so I've got sort of two perspectives on this. One is as a much smaller professional services firm, where the traditional model of what we do is really just bringing in as much information as you can, and then like a human being reads all of it, and then provides their insight on what they think what they think the themes are, what they think the conclusions are, and what they think the actionable insights are, essentially. And that's been really the model of a consulting and strategy and research and communications firm for a really long time. That's definitely changing for us now. We're not looking right now for full-time AI talent yet, but everybody that we're hiring right now, needs to have some kind of some kind of skills to apply or to use AI tools. Partly because it's an efficiency argument for administrative work, and partly because as a smaller firm in a market, we need to make sure that we're as competitive as possible, and being able to use those tools to generate better insights more quickly is really, really important to the future of our business model, partly because it's a way that we can serve more clients and deliver the same products, deliver more of the same products in the same amount of time. But eventually, and I'll probably touch on this a little bit later, when we started this company 3 years ago, we started the company like 55 days before the pandemic hit. It was super good timing. We thought, maybe in 5 to 10 years we'll have a full-time data scientist on staff, because we're running things. We're running sometimes tens of thousands of inputs from people, or from tens of thousands of people. And now it's probably 3 years out. In between, when we have a full-time data scientist that's helping us, develop these tools or work with these tools or develop our own tools, we're probably going to need somebody to coach our teams and our leadership on how to use those tools. We did a study about 18 months ago on AI talent, the AI talent pipeline, largely with oil and gas companies, but with a lot of companies that serve oil and gas companies. And even at that time, about 85% of them, and these are companies that are, 50% of them were between 1 and 10 people. 85% of them were using some kind of machine learning in their work on a regular basis, and 95% of them planned to continue to develop that. But at the time, even 18 months ago, just to what Adam said, there was a real crunch. So the focus for a lot of these companies was less on sort of hiring a PhD in machine learning, and more on taking somebody with computer science skills and upskilling them within their organization. Like really finding really practical ways to educate them on like machine learning tools and AI tools capabilities, and building them up within the company. Partly because of the cost of it, and partly because they felt that those employees would be a little bit more loyal to them. Right? They've been part of the company. They understand the business. They're not going to just get snatched up by a larger company for $50,000 extra.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm wondering. I'm going back to this impetus placed on AI tools and capabilities, and I'm wondering if Ian or Adam, if your organizations kind of can connect with what Chris just spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've observed early on is, tools really sort of raise everyone's game, and they allow you to build full production assets. When I originally joined the organization, where the organization was in terms of how it kept and stored and maintained its data, and then the tools that could access them, really sort of constrained the total number of solutions that I could come up with in order to solve problems for the business, and that meant that quite often it was me on the weekend sort of cranking a handle of math in order to sort of get some of these systems we were building to work. That sort of investment in tools to make it easier for data scientists and others to build alongside each other. Modern AI platforms, modern data infrastructure, the amount of compute, the amount of work you can get done in an amount of time, and the amount of overhead you can save has been absolutely transformational in terms of how we even think about the problems that we're facing and what a solution can look like. I think the other spot that's really exciting, and much like Chris mentioned, is that opportunity to democratize, and that opportunity to, as the tools become easier and easier to work with, more and more people can come to the table and make meaningful contributions to development. And that means you can bring the business, who know the client, who know the problems, who understand the context, closer and closer to that development team. And that only means you're building better, more effective solutions.
Adam?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think the tooling is really important to boost productivity, as Ian mentioned. I also think from a sort of a client service provider perspective in the organization that I come from at KPMG, we need to do work very efficiently because people are paying us money to do work, and we need to be able to deliver the work to a high quality as efficiently as possible. Certainly we need to take the time to do it well, but it does need to be efficient, so the tools really help us there. The other advantage of having people with hands-on experience using tools, when we go into a client setting, they may tell us, we're using Microsoft Azure and we're experimenting with C3 or Palantir or something. Having people that have experience using those tools gives you a leg up when you're bidding for work, because they'll have more confidence that your organization can actually deliver on it, and you're not trying to figure it out for the first time. So that's something when we're looking for talent. It's not the make or break necessarily, but it is something that we do look for, is hands-on experience with tools, certifications. Most of the major platform providers offer training, certifications, so we're certainly looking for that as well as we explore talent. But definitely having the tools available. There's so many options now to make things easier to reuse work and make things a little bit faster, so it's not all custom and from scratch. Really can accelerate development, solve business problems faster.
Absolutely. So you've all spoken a little bit about cross-functional teams and different skill sets that you would need in a cross-functional team. So as organizations build their AI capacity, there seems to be more of a focus on this idea of cross-functional teams. And I could argue for this because I'm part of one, somebody with definitely not a lot of technical skill in AI, but more of the soft skills, if you will. And so why do you think this is? Could you speak a little bit more about the value in building cross-functional teams within organizations? I'm wondering if, Adam, you want to start with that.
Sure. I think cross-functional teams are critical to being able to build, maintain, operate a modern AI system. I think there were some use cases, sort of low-hanging fruit, easier ones to solve that maybe you didn't need a full cross-functional team, but I think those are mostly table stakes now. When we work with clients, it's usually to solve a very complex problem. It requires a lot of domain expertise in that industry or in that area to really understand sort of the nuance of the business problem. So there's skill sets that are mostly optimized to that. Certainly requires people that can work with, manage, transform data. It requires data science to be able to, build models and pick the right ones. Requires change management support and coaching. I think, as Chris mentioned, the role of someone who can coach a leadership team to actually care about this and encourage their teams to adopt it is really important. So as Ian alluded to at the start of the talk, the unicorn person, very, very difficult to find, if at all possible. So I think that creates a necessity to have a team. But even if you could find it, what you're really doing is taking someone that might be optimal for a subset of that task and making them do everything. So that's, kind of drawing them away from their strength. So I think being able to harness the power of a team, have different perspectives is really important. And maybe just the last thing I'll say is I think when you have a team and a team working well, you can really harness the power of diversity in a team. So you bring people in with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of thinking about a problem, different cultures, and I think you'll get the best possible product from that. End users of the systems are usually diverse, so you'd want to have that diversity in your development team so that you're covering off perspectives, you're minimizing issues that you might have foreseen if you had diversity in a cross-functional team.
Ian, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with absolutely everything Adam said. I think that diversity of perspectives is essential, and we saw that early on. Even when we were trying to sort of form small assemblies of unicorns, that the unique backgrounds of individuals, their approach to solving problems, and a lot of that was sort of informed by their discipline. Whether it was a background in computational comp sci or physics or cognitive neuroscience, whatever, they would come with a certain framework for solving problems and getting to work. But as we began to build these sort of cross-functional teams, the diversity of perspectives really only made the solution stronger. And so I think, within that environment, one of the greatest things we've done as an organization is create more clarity around roles and expectations for those roles. And I think that's helped team members to have those conversations that Adam was alluding to. Okay, I may be able to do all of those things, but here's where my strengths lie, and maybe these are even the things I love. And I know that was, for me, some of the most powerful career advice I received early on. From our former CEO, Dave Mowat. He was talking about how it's important to figure out the things you love, the things you're good at, and the things you can get paid for. And then somewhere in there is the Venn diagram of what's going to be a successful career, and those things will change and drift over time. That's kind of self-understanding becomes, I think, really essential as you begin working on bigger, more cross-functional teams, because it allows you to understand your own strengths, it allows you to appreciate the strengths of others, and it then allows you to have a communication, a framework for communication where you can come to, as a team, a common dialogue where you can begin to figure out, well, how are we going to team up against this problem? Well, here's each of our respective superpowers and how we can work together to bring those to the table.
Trying not to repeat what Adam and Ian have just said, because this is all very smart, but the thing that we, as a smaller, more specialized company, we essentially sell is we just sell insights, right? And the way that you get paid to give those insights to people is you have to write a report. These tools can make that process much more efficient, but the premise of our company is that it's highly interdisciplinary. So the research, we have people that are trained in research, and they talk to the communications and strategy people. They talk to the people with more of a marketing brain, and we figure out what we can come up with based on the feedback that we receive through whatever engagement or data collection or feedback collection process that we develop. And it's really important that we are able to really dig down into that information and figure out what what's the thing that nobody else can see, or what's the thing that's really apparent. That's really important but not apparent. So we spend a lot of time, like one of the most high stress things we do is when somebody from like the strategy end of the things sits down with one of the data, like our research analysts, and we do crosstabs on a survey. So we have a survey of 2,000 people, making sure that we are thinking carefully about what those cross tabulations look like is what's going to get us some of those like insights that people approach us to help develop for them. And one of the really important parts of that is making sure that everybody understands how one another works and what tools one another has in order to find those insights and what role that they play. So when, I said it a little bit earlier, and Adam and Ian have said as well, the coaching aspect of like how to use AI, how to use these tools that are developing is important, but it's just as important for us to be able to have people have AI trained people, or eventually full on data scientists and AI trained people. It's just as important for them to be able to understand every other part of the business and be able to contribute to it and help us develop, have them chime in and say, well, if we use this tool, we might be able to find these kinds of insights, and they need to understand the context of the topic. They need to understand what the clients are expecting. They need to understand what's acceptable for them in a corporate setting. And so we really need those people to be not just like some person in the basement that we like feed numbers to, and then other things come out and you never have to actually look at them. What we really need is we need them to be able to work as a team, and they be able to look at something and say like, oh, I think Chris would really be interested in this, and then be able to present it to me. The other thing is, like, quite frankly, it's going to be such an important part of everything that we do in 3 to 5 years. Like, I mean, it's important now, but it's really going to be. It's not going to be a competitive advantage in 3 years. It's just going to be table stakes, like we've said here earlier, and I need to be able to put those people in front of a client, and I need them to be able to answer questions, and I need them to be able to give answers to clients. And you only have an hour with them. Usually, we're working with C-suite type people, and or people that need to deliver this information to C-suite type people. They can't get a technical answer. They need to be able to get a good, like, usable, transmittable answer from us to them to whoever they are reporting to.
I'm wondering if we can delve in a little bit more about this idea of what is needed for a cross-functional team to be successful. What are some things that a technical person might need to have in order to communicate to those C-suite executives? What kind of skills are necessary for a cross-functional team to truly be successful, in your opinion?
I mean, the number one thing above all is curiosity. If you're not, like, numbers are numbers and data is data and input is input, but if you're not genuinely curious about what you can get out of it and what the impact of the recommendations you're going to make are going to be, you're just going to pass along. You're just going to pass along numbers, and eventually that's something that like the way we're moving, like there will be a tool I can log into and do that. I need someone to be able to look at it and think like what does this mean, and what could the impact of this be? That's, I think, the number one thing. And then the second thing, I think the second most important thing is the ability for people to be able to transmit technical information. Like I need to understand how they arrived at the conclusions that they arrived at, or I need to understand how the work was fed in, and like what the weaknesses of it are, what the strengths of it are, what I need to look out for. Because at the end of the day, like before you put it in front of somebody, or before you help clients make decisions on the basis of what you're giving them, you need to apply a significant amount of judgment on it, on the technical elements of what you've been working on.
Yeah, I really, really love the curiosity word. I think that's really powerful. And I think that works across all of the roles on the cross-functional team. So we talked a little bit about the technical person being curious, but I think that equally applies to the product manager, the UI UX person, being curious about some of the work the technical team is doing. As I've found, the cross-functional team really starts to gel really well when there's a good shared understanding of what everyone on the team is doing. Don't need to know every single detail or every single aspect of everyone's work, but enough that you can ask questions, you can challenge something in a respectful way, of course, but you can actually have those good, deep conversations that get you to the best possible outcome. So I think that's really, really important, to be curious. Yeah, I think in a cross-functional team, being able also to trust the rest of the team and be a good teammate are probably two other things that I think are really important. So I have to trust, the other people on my team, that they're competent, that they're doing their job, that they're reliable, and will actually, deliver on what they said they'll deliver, and not, getting in there and being too disruptive. But I think, from a personal perspective, doing that same thing and being a good teammate back, communicating when you're having problems, reaching out to team members, building relationships. All of those things are really, really important, sort of behind the scenes skills that you need to have to make a cross-functional team work.
I'd agree with everything. No surprise. Of course, I think curiosity is an absolute must. The only thing I'd add is I think one of the most important things for work, to derive meaning from work, is for it to feel purposeful. And that is about really connecting to outcomes and driving some kind of positive change. And I think it's something that we always look for when we hire. It's something that is commonly true of all of the people I work with, and is inspiring, honestly, to see their drive to create a positive change in the life of our clients or in the life of our team members, and to do that through the thoughtful application of artificial intelligence and building true systems that work and get a job done. That shared purpose, when we form a cross-functional team, we walk them through all of the agile ceremonies, and that begins with a charter, and a charter needs a mission statement. That team needs to decide on what its purpose is, and they need to dial in the vocabulary of that purpose, and the vocabulary is important. Right? It becomes a shared understanding of what the goal is and what we're all trying to do. I think that once that's set, then you can really sort of leave it up to that squad to make the most of their collective strengths to get the job done. Because reality's tricky. Building functional products out of data in a world that's constantly changing, where the data's constantly changing, where systems and technology are evolving, where regulations continue to evolve, and all of these are important, and all of these are opportunities, but they're also all barriers to overcome. That common North Star and sense of purpose becomes absolutely essential for a cross-functional team.
I think when you do the agile training, you do scrum training and stuff, there's this concept of a self-organizing team. And that's usually where you're going to get the most power, is when that team is self-sufficient, they can self-organize, they can work through their own problems and tasks. They're not reliant on a product owner or product manager telling them what to do. And I think that comes with a lot of the things that have been discussed in the last 5 minutes or so around curiosity, trust, working together. Those things, I think, really envelop that idea of a self-organizing team. And that's where I think the team has the most power, is when they can get to that level.
Kind of switching gears, but not, all in the same theme here. What are the biggest challenges that you think companies face in attracting and retaining AI talent? And do you feel like these challenges have changed at all over the years? Chris, maybe we'll start with you.
I definitely think they've changed. I think that maybe one of the biggest barriers now are expectations about what the different kinds of work in AI will look like. I said a little bit earlier that having a data scientist and maybe even internally developed AI tools is coming from our company, one way or the other, and probably coming faster than I thought. But But it might not just be a data scientist. I think there's probably, in the next few years, I think there's probably a lot of room for someone to be like a fractal data scientist that companies can hire for 10 hours a month or 10 hours a week or whatever. I think that's going to be in terms of how we integrate these capabilities into companies. I think that's going to be a really important feature. So if you're coming out of school and you have these skills, or if you've developed these skills within your own company and you're looking for something new to do, that I think that's going to be that's something I think people should try and consider. There's probably a massive market for that, just given the way that our particular sector works is larger agencies. Like there's obviously like your KPMGs and your Deloittes and your PwCs, and they're not going away because they're awesome.
Especially KPMG.
Yeah, especially KPMG. If you need an audit, KPMG is but in the middle, companies below that, companies of 75 people that are doing strategy and marketing and social media and research. It's pretty easy for you to do that on your own, and much smaller companies are going to continue to develop, and then there'll be, I think, a bit of a divide between small companies, something in the middle, and then there'll be the big four. So there is a market for that. The other thing that I think that one of the biggest barriers is the need for AI talent is so ubiquitous and across all different kinds of companies that if you have a really talented AI, like really good AI talent in your company, like Google or OpenAI or like a major company is going to be able to pick them up, and you're just not going to be able to like if someone offers you $100,000 extra like a year, like you've got to give those people as a smaller company some kind of incentive to stick with you. I have not figured out what that is yet. Any of the companies that I know that are in the professional service firm on the major or largely on the digital side, they've also not figured that out, and they are churning people out constantly. But if you're churning people out, that also provides opportunities for you to pull people in and like really shape them for your company, which might how you culture, compensation, equity, those things are all going to matter for AI talent, because they're going to be in demand. It's going to be the job for the next 20 years.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of Chris's points. I think obviously pay compensation is going to be an important challenge for any company. Most are going to try and be competitive. There will be some that go above and beyond, and that's very difficult to compete with. So I'm at KPMG now. I've also been with smaller companies and have lived that and breathed that challenge. I think some of the other things I've observed, employee experience is really important now. So I think what an employee wants to see out of their work. Ian had mentioned sort of the purposefulness, like so the S and the ESG, the social, I think is really important for a lot of people right now, that they can connect. Seeing a lot of AI use cases being explored that are about efficiency or productivity, and they're not necessarily like the coolest, if I said that. So sometimes they're about like, reducing the number of claims that get processed or something, and it's not like, it's harder to connect to that. So I think employers that can find ways to create that connection with their employees and finding ways for employees to enjoy their experience at work. Certainly saw a lot in the last couple of years, a lot more emphasis on sort of the non-monetary benefits as well. Things that connect people, that bring people together, employee events that can occur outside of work, taking time out of a work week to actually connect for things that have nothing to do with work. Like all those things are really important. So the culture of an organization, I guess, would be a simpler way of saying that, really, really matters. Making sure that employees are honest about the type of work they do. So we've got 3 different organizations that kind of do 3, although aligned in AI and data, different in the types of work they're doing. So being honest about that and not trying to, oversell, just being clear, I think is really important as well. But yeah, it's difficult to find people. I think, as Chris alluded to, there's always sort of a threat of competition. And just trying to make your value proposition for an employee, the talent value proposition, as clear and compelling as possible. Sort of what I would focus on.
Adam, we finally have something we disagree on.
Okay.
What's cooler than efficiency use cases? Like, honestly, cutting down the amount of time people spend on sort of boring or mundane activities, I love that stuff. I love that stuff. Get rid of all of the paperwork. But where we do agree is, you mentioned culture, and you mentioned like the importance of culture. And I think one of the themes, of the discussion so far has been the sort of growing clarity in what AI data products are, how we assemble to build them, what is the role of a data scientist in that journey, what are the other roles that we need in order to get the job done. And so in your postings, you can be much more clear about who you're looking for, which is great. But then it's on you as your posting organization, as you mentioned, to make it clear about who you are, like what your values are, what that work will look like. Right, and so I think you're right, Adam. Like, you don't want to sort of misrepresent and say, paint a picture that's not aligned with reality, because that would be a terrible experience for absolutely everyone involved. I think because we can be much more clear in broadcasting the message about the type of person we're looking for, we can be the onus is on us then to be clear as an organization about what our purpose is, why we exist, how we form, how we get work done. But to understand, like, well, in my context, right, if I'm working at ATB or I'm building or supporting a data science team, like, what is our special sauce? Like, what is unique to us? What is fun about being here? And what I found is that a lot of that is connecting people with the right kinds of opportunities. I think at ATB we're the right size, where as a data scientist you can come in at a very junior level. You can receive some fantastic coaching and training. In a mature model, you have a chance to sort of break off pieces of work and grow, and you can own more and more and more of a portfolio. At the same time, we offer tremendous work-life balance, which is more key. Like, I think being able to work remotely and supporting individuals in that, and I think we learned a lot throughout the pandemic in new ways of supporting work, and also recognizing some of the hidden work that was already going on in people's homes, and getting good at talking about that, right, and supporting those individuals. Well, I can be more clear in expressing those as values that we support and that we will back. And so, I think for our team members, we do see team members leave for really exciting opportunities, sometimes at big tech companies, sometimes not, sometimes just some other really exciting opportunity, a chance for them to learn or grow in a different way, and we celebrate that. But we also get team members who take advantage of the culture we have, and who have a chance to grow and continue to sort of expand, but enjoy that work-life balance and enjoy being in the province.
Can I just add one thing? It's sort of a sub-point to the purpose discussion is, at any given time, I'm writing a strategic plan for an organization. It's like one of the main things that sort of the cornerstone of my own practice. And there's almost always, every one that I've done, there's your external goals that you have for the next 5 years, and then there's your internal goals. And almost always there's a goal in there about talent. And I think that if what we're starting to advise those companies to do is start thinking about like what tech you're applying and how you can integrate AI into your work to make the organization itself more efficient. That has to be a part of the next round of 5-year strategic plans for every organization. If you're not there and you're not dedicating those plans and resources to it, you're going to fall behind. So that, I mean, as the people in this room that are coming out of school or you're looking for work, when you talk to a company, you should be asking them, what part does AI play in your strategic plan? Either implicitly or indirectly. Because I think that will tell you a lot about how serious the company is about creating those cross-functional teams, about connecting what you do with the purpose of the organization. Because, and then it's not just some board member saying, like, make sure we hire someone with AI. And you're like, oh, what does that mean? So they need to have like an actual plan for it. And I think that's really going to be really important in the next 5 years.
I wonder if we can unpack that a little more. Like, what other questions are there that the upcoming talent could ask the companies that they're interested in terms of AI talent and what that's going to look like, or what that company is going to do to retain them? What are some of those questions that could be asked?
I would definitely ask, what is your professional development plan for me? But also, what's your professional development plan to integrate this with everybody else? Like, how is everybody else learning about these tools? Like, if they are going to be integrated in everything, are you giving everybody else in the company an opportunity to develop a fluency in it? I think that's going to be really, again, I think it's really about demonstrating the seriousness of it rather than allowing people to just buzzword it. Yeah, so those 2 questions I think they should ask.
Any thoughts on that?
Definitely agree, and I think that's where also data literacy, digital fluency, AI education, what levels are those going on at? What do those initiatives look like? And I think you called it out perfectly. Any organization you're talking to, they should have a data strategy. They should understand the role of data to the future success of that organization. They should then understand the role of AI in creating value and really sort of being successful to the long-term outcomes for that organization. But I'd say an awareness of the risks, right? What are they doing from a governance space? Because I think often data platform investments go hand in hand with thoughtful data governance investments. And all of these are proof points, as you put it, that no, this organization is taking it seriously, that they're trying to get people aligned on a common vision of what artificial intelligence is and what it can do. They are backing that with meaningful investments in tooling and infrastructure. They're working on change management in order to like prove value-driving outcomes. All of this is aligned to strategy, but they're doing it responsibly, and they have an eye on those risks and a solid understanding of what those risks are.
Yeah, these are great answers. I would add, maybe asking what does success actually look like in this role that I'm applying for would be really, really important. If you can't get a clear answer on that, that's probably a red flag. I'd want to know about growth plans. So what does growth look like? What type of training and professional development? I think what Chris was alluding to would be really important. Maybe ask a little bit about some of the challenges that the organization is facing. If it's an organization, so you're like sort of in an ATB context working within the financial institution, what are they facing? If you're coming into an organization like KPMG that's consulting other clients, what are some of the challenges in working in that environment? What type of industries or types of clients are you working with? That gives you a general sense of what you're actually going to be doing, where the opportunities lie. And combining that with sort of growth and professional development plans can give you a general idea of sort of what that will look like. But yeah, definitely understanding what success looks like, what would the first 6 months look like in my role, what kind of supports are available for me are types of questions that I definitely want to ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add one thing, just slightly anecdotal? So the research that we did when we talked to those companies was, we actually did it for Amii, great client, by the way. And one of the questions we asked when we were developing these questions, I look over them and I'm like, oh, that's a good question, that's a good question. And I'm like, one of the questions we asked was about ethics. Like, what's your plan for ethics? Or are ethics important? Ethics in data collection and AI important? And I looked at the question and I remember thinking, like, who's going to say no to this? Like, no one's going to hear ethics in the interview and be like, nah. 25% did. 25% were like, no, I don't care. But as this is like, as AI talent starts getting integrated into these companies, you're going to be leaders in setting the standard for for everything from output to ethics, and I think that might be a question that you should ask is like, do you even plan to have an ethics plan for the work that we do? I like people to my face said like, no, I don't care, and I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, like about 27% said yes, of course, it's very important, and in the middle they sort of, I think the middle people were like, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll just build on that too, because I think that's really important. I know in working with Ian in the past, like ATB has resources that are thinking about responsible AI all the time. That's sort of their core job function. And so you may want to ask a question about sort of like, what is the plan, but also sort of how many people do you have focused on this right now as sort of their primary focus. Everyone I would expect most organizations are going to say they think responsible AI and ethics is really important. But there's a difference between saying that and actually kind of putting some resources and some action behind it. So that might be something that you might want to ask. And just on a different note, I know we were kind of focusing a lot on questions you could ask. One thing that stands out for me as a hiring manager in interviews is when people come prepared, having done a little bit of research about the organization, and asking some tailored questions. So if you're working, in a financial institution, you're interviewing with Ian, you might be asking questions around how AI is helping with personalization of advice or something like that. So shows that you actually took the time to prepare and be interested in that company, and it's not just a transactional interview about a job. It's something that you're genuinely interested in. I think that, probably heard that advice before, but I think it's really, really, really important to show up prepared to these coffee chats or interviews that you're having with people, having a general sense of what that organization does. You can flush it out a little bit more in your discussion, but coming in cold with no knowledge at all is a bit of a red flag from a hiring manager perspective. So I thought I would just share that.
Thank you all. So finally, I have one more question, and then we'll open up questions to the audience. Since it's more than about compensation these days, don't get me wrong, compensation is still important, monetary compensation, but how can organizations, and I think you all touched on this a little bit, but maybe if you could just reiterate or speak a little bit more about it, create a diverse and inclusive workplace that attracts a broad range of AI talent? So, Chris, thoughts?
I think that the opportunity to upskill is a great way to foster some inclusivity and equity within your company, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of choose people that might not normally have opportunities in these areas, and give them the educational or professional development resources to do that. Hiring is always hiring to create a more inclusive environment or inclusive company is always kind of difficult, because those practices take not really long time. They take a while to catch, and then you're at the mercy of the people that are applying to you, and it gets concentrically better as you go. But if you're starting out, I think just giving people that might not normally have those opportunities the opportunity to upskill, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I might go back to what I kind of said about responsible AI and asking some questions around sort of like resourcing and effort that's actually being applied to some of these programs in an organization. So similarly to everyone's going to say we think responsible AI is important, everyone's going to say we think diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, but do you actually have programs? Are your recruiters actually looking to hire a diverse workforce? What kind of supports are in place for active employees that come from different backgrounds? Do you celebrate diversity? So some of those questions you could be asking in an interview process to get a sense of what the organization actually does, and actually kind of puts their money where their mouth is on that, I think would be really important.
I'd echo that absolutely, and I think that's where organizations have. So they ought to be able to provide proof points there. And they ought to be able to really sort of point to clear roles that exist within the organization, active programs that exist within the organization, how those conversations roll out. And so you ought to expect really good answers there. I think then another sort of telling feature is, how does the organization create space for individuals? And I think another thing we learned sort of coming through the pandemic was the different ways we can imagine and reimagine work. Okay, well, what are they doing now? How are they leaning into what physical office space is for versus at-home work? I know, recently when we come together, it's for big planning events. It's to sort of share really complicated ideas, or mostly for celebration, right? Like when you hit some big project milestone, it's easier to do a pizza party if everyone's in the room. But I think at the same time, like that idea of space and creating space around individuals, it helps you to accommodate a wider diversity of individuals and their needs, the burden of care that they may have at home, the other sort of aspects of their lives. So I think the more that an organization equips itself and its people leaders at different levels to use those tools to create space for their people, whether that's in how work is managed, how teams come together, what the policies look like for sort of working remotely versus on site. All of those become important determinants of like how much space we can make for everybody.
Thank you so much. I want to finish off by just having each of our panelists kind of say one big takeaway that they think the audience should garner, one piece of advice that you would impart to the audience, and then we'll open it up for questions. So whoever wants to start first. You can also reiterate something you already said.
I'll turn back to, I think the best career advice I've ever received, which was from Dave Mowat, which is figure out those things that you love, that you're good at, and that you can get paid for, and be aware of what those skills are in your life and how those continue to evolve. Because if you're missing one of those, it's going to be a bummer somehow. So plan for them and find ways to build those into your career. But knowledge of those things makes it, I think, easier to work in a fast-changing work environment.
Yeah, maybe I'll go next. I think I'll just kind of build on what you said at the end, fast-changing work environment. What an exciting time to be working as an AI practitioner right now. I think, having flexibility, and I'll steal Chris's word again, curiosity, really, really important. So overall advice, I think, is, take the time, do the research, be curious, explore your options. I think there will be a lot of options for people. Maybe I'll just say one other thing is advice I'd heard from a former CIO at Rogers Telecommunications. If you're in a position and it's not a great fit for you, don't be afraid to explore other things. I would encourage people certainly to have conversations with their managers and try and solve issues. But sometimes you'll just be in a spot and it's not a great fit anymore. Don't feel that you have to be stuck in one spot. But certainly, take the time to try and resolve issues first, I would say,
I think the most exciting thing for me about integrating AI into our work and really work across across the economy, across our society, is that it is going to give more people the opportunity to work with purpose. There's a lot of stuff that we do on a daily basis, whether it's scheduling or whether it's typing or whether it's having to read a gigantic spreadsheet of stuff and then pull out the themes. That's fine, that's part of your work. But these tools will allow us to do, like I said, allow to do more insight work, which is ultimately what people at our company really want to do. Nobody wants to write a report. Everybody wants to explain excitedly what the insights that they developed are. And as an integrated part of a team like that, AI practitioners are going to help deliver that, and that's really transformational. Don't be afraid to get into every part of the business that you're working in. Don't be afraid to connect people who might not have the skills to use a tool to that tool and help them figure out how to use it. If you are in social media, right? If you're a social media content developer right now, that is the most, I think, exciting communications field to be in with AI, because it is dramatically changing the efficiency of that field, and allowing, being a social media content manager used to be a real slog, and now you can spend a lot more time thinking and a lot less time moving shit around on an image, or coming up with 100 captions that are all but 2 are going to get declined by the client. It is a really amazing field to be in right now.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we can get a round of applause for our panelists. And then I would love to open the floor to questions. I think we have a couple of mic runners. We have about 30 minutes for questions. So yeah, please feel free to ask.
First of all, thanks for this great panel. I think all the information is super information. I am not the workforce. I am sitting in your seat, almost 100%, so I love all of your information. You all hire and seek talent. Besides money, what would you say are the top 5 values you found that current AI talent is looking for?
I can kick it off. So I think if I think back to some of those sort of conversations and the questions I'm being asked, usually the questions are in and around the sort of there's sort of 2 parts of the job. There's sort of questions in and around the day-to-day. So what kind of tools will I be using? What does the flow of work look like? Where are the barriers in that flow? There'll be sort of general questions to find out, hey, like, when am I going to get stuck, and when is it going to be frustrating? What are you doing to help smooth that out? There are also usually a lot of questions about the broader purpose. Where is AI going? What do the investments look like? They may have questions in and around certain use cases that were discussed during the interview. So like, if someone's really passionate about leveraging large language models, they may be very passionate to explore, like, well, what is ATB doing with that? And then I can talk about all those amazing efficiency use cases. But they may not, right? They may be more on the client modeling side, or in which case they may have more questions in and around personalization. And so I think like those are definite focus areas. You do need to have good answers to, hey, in terms of the flow of work, like, here's how you're going to be set up to be successful. Here are the teams I'm going to wrap around you in order to make you successful. Here are the tools that you'll have, and here's the buy-in that we have within the broader organization. But then there's that sort of bigger purpose of like, well, where is this stuff going, and what are the, in terms of the projects, like what this technology means to the organization and the clients and the outcomes they're trying to drive. Can you clearly communicate that and make it clear that this isn't just sort of a short-term investment?
Yeah, I guess for values outside of just pure compensation, I think organizational culture is a really big one. Some of the employee experience stuff we spoke to, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, those to me, sort of in the growth, like how those would be big ones for me, outside of just pure pay and benefits, that really stand out as core values that people will be looking for. And this is like a drum I bang almost constantly, because it's most of the reading I do outside of my work, is flexibility. You must show up at the office for 5 days a week is dead. It will never come back. People do want to hang out with their dog at home, and they can, and I don't mean that in like a derisive way. That's a really important part of our company, is because if you provide flexibility, the main ingredient in success when you provide flexibility is trust. And if people are proving that they can be trusted every day, then they're almost always going to be better connected with your purpose. And also, people, I mean, just certainly as a result of the pandemic and moving forward, people just want
I think they're a little more connected to their own lives and a little less connected to their work life. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think, I don't think people are as willing to give away their time anymore to commuting. So flexibility, I think, is just generally, but AI talent's going to get pulled not just locally. It's from all over. Whereas like some of the strategists that we use, like we're in front of clients a lot. Like we have to like go to their office and talk to them, or we have to like go to their office and get their board to participate in something. That's not always going to necessarily be the case, but that flexibility has to run both ways, though. You've got to allow flexibility for your AI talent. Your AI talent's got to allow flexibility for the office, so that when I say I need you to come and I need you to explain this to the client, you can't say, well, it's Tuesday and I don't go to work on Tuesdays. What can you do today? So yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you all for the great discussion. My question is around literacy. So I often think about 3 types of literacy. Business is the first. That's the one we need. I mean, we need to understand what we're doing. We started talking about data literacy just because of all the changes that we've been facing over the last few years. And it's imperative that we understand how to talk about data. The third one, and I find that we often take that one for granted, is people literacy. Myself as a data scientist, there are days I spend more time talking to people than actually looking at data or writing Python code. So my question is, how can you ensure that we are properly bringing together those 3 types of literacy: business, data, and people?
For a company my size, we usually have the people literacy thing kind of down, because when a company my size, everybody kind of has to do everything, and that's a difficult thing to manage. But again, for a company my size, when we bring on data science people, I can create as the chief strategist, and I can create a plan. But I'm not a data scientist, and so the people that we bring on are going to need to alter that plan for me to make it work as much as possible. So that literacy is going to come for us from the people that we hire.
So I think at a company like ATB, we can offer lots of flexibility, and in that you can create space for individuals. And with that, then you can support them in personalized learning plans. And so what we would have, are different sort of toolkits to understand, okay, like, well, what are the supports that an individual needs? And those may be sort of structural. They may be in the flow of work. It may be that some of the sort of conversations are happening in an unproductive fashion, or they're not happening, right? In which case, that becomes about sort of understanding that as an issue and then working around it. But quite often, it is more about connecting that individual with the right opportunities in order to grow, or partnering them with a mentor who we know happens to be really good at that piece. And so there, we're often able to sort of take advantage of the fact that we have a lot of different individuals who are very good at different aspects of the job, and we have a lot of flexibility in how we can arrange and execute against work. And then we have a lot of sort of self-serve supports that are sort of enterprise access to different kinds of professional training, personal development.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I would agree with Chris that your hiring is really important, bring the right people in. And with the in around personal development plans and having supports, I think, the only thing I'll add to that is your practices as an organization. So how you organize yourselves, how you actually, how you operate, like your operating model will be really important. So if you have like a data science team that's completely siloed off from the rest of the business and has no interaction, good luck having business literacy. If you don't spend any time with your data science team educating the rest of the organization, good luck with improving data literacy across the board. So I think creating in your structures and processes some of those tools and supports to bring everyone up, combined with at an individual level knowing where you're strong and where you need to develop, and building out realistic, pragmatic plans for that, working with mentors and working with others to develop skills over time. I think it's a combination of things that come together to do that, but you have to practice what you preach and actually put it into place.
I think that's actually, and I think maybe one thing to note about that is that that's really hard to do. Like, I think you think, well, I'll put together a plan and then in 3 months everyone will be like up to speed. These tools are changing faster than you can teach them in some instances. And so, making sure that you're doing it consistently and incrementally is really the only way to get, that's the sort of the fastest way to, I think, to get to success on what Adam and Ian have just described. But communicating patience around this is going to be really important. It's the biggest change in business since email, and it's a much bigger change. So, people are going to come along at different speeds, and you got to give people a bit of grace around that.
Do we have another question?
Hi. I think your talk was very insightful, and my question is maybe similar to the last question about how there's often a gap between technical people and maybe non-technical people, like business, facing people. And I was wondering whether there's specific things that maybe technical people or non-technical people could do to bridge the communication gap to make a more effective product or solution ultimately.
Yeah, maybe I'll start this one. I think I'll just start by emphasizing I think that has to be a two-way street. I think there's often in communication like this an emphasis for the technical group to be able to speak or communicate in business terms, which of course is important. But I actually think the opposite is true as well. When you're working in a cross-functional team, and I've observed this where you've got someone who's got a very great business sense and they couldn't be bothered to learn anything around the concepts on the technical, and that doesn't work either. So I think it has to be two ways. Curiosity, to Chris's point earlier, I think is really important. Having that natural curiosity to want to learn, taking time to actually connect with people, ask them questions about what they're doing, not being shy if you don't understand, and asking for further clarification. And something that I've really, really emphasized in my own development is self-study. So I haven't been shy to either do certifications, go on Coursera, learn stuff, just ingrain myself in the experience, just really dive in, and not being afraid to say, I don't know the answer, or I didn't understand, can you re-explain that? So all of that coming together, but again, I think it has to be two-way. If you just are putting all the pressure on the technical team to speak in business all the time, that can be very kind of demoralizing. So I think it has to be both. And I think when you have everyone kind of raising their game, you'll get the best communication overall.
I would say, encourage them to, or not even encourage, but mandate that you kind of be part of one another's worlds. I go to a conference every year, the IEP2 conference, the International Association of Public Participation. That would be a really great thing for the data scientist to go to, because as much as they're talking about techniques about how you, they talk a lot about techniques about how to set up public engagement, and which is essentially setting up a data and an input pipeline. And it would be interesting for someone with a data science lens to look at that and think about, how can I help do those engagement designs? Similarly, I think this would be I've been on site for a couple days here, and I've learned a whole bunch here. And so it's been, I think, just being able to show people that what's happening in your sectors and give them something to read, and that's I think a really important part.
And I think everything just described gives you a really good toolkit to kind of, when there is an issue in communication or understanding, to kind of just name that elephant, name it for what it is, and then it becomes easier to deal with. It becomes easier to have a shared conversation about, oh, okay, well, we have to work together. We're here to do a job. We're here to get things done. What are we going to do about this elephant? And Adam, I think you raised a really important point about there is this implicit expectation that it is the technical person who's meeting the business. I don't think that's fair. I think it is on everyone to to be open, to be curious, to ask questions, to be thoughtful about their own expertise and the limits of it, and to understand the expertise of someone else and how essential it is in getting the job done. At the same time, I know one of the best things I ever did was take advantage of opportunities in my organization to just go and spend time in the branch, to like be on the front lines of whatever the business was. And it didn't need to be a lot of time. It was sort of a morning just experiencing that world. You very quickly can develop a common understanding of how your business works and what the pain points are. But you also usually end up with a pocket business expert who kind of likes you. Maybe you bought them lunch, and who you can ask those questions to. And you have that person you can go to that when you have those questions. And maybe you don't want to, in a stakeholder meeting, say, well, I don't really understand that business acronym, or you can just quick ping them on the side.
Maybe just one more thing. I think this is a really important point for leaders to really drive the culture. So as the leader doesn't have to be the person in charge necessarily, but if you are that person, you're in the management role, like ask a question. Even if you think you might know the answer, make it safe for the rest of the group to be able to ask questions, to feel safe that if you don't know the answer, that's not bad. But that can come from anyone in the group too. It doesn't have to be the person in charge. So sometimes it just takes someone to make that first step, to make things safe, to be able to ask questions and be vulnerable, can really have a big impact in a group. So if you're feeling up to that, that's something that I think really makes a difference in a team that's forming and storming, is to just be vulnerable and be the person that kind of jumps in there.
Yeah, psychological safety is a very important ingredient in successful cross-functional teams.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have another question? If you could stand, thank you.
Yeah. So you guys really touched on a lot of the points about the management layer and how we're supposed to help out. One question I would have is, okay, so you're supporting your team, you're managing your AI talent, you're working with them on the projects, but how do you also manage the upstream leaders, the directors, the VPs, executives who still see AI as a black box? How do we demystify it for them, but also make sure that our teams are not feeling like, well, my executive doesn't know what the heck I'm doing with this data. They just think it's a spreadsheet that's really powerful. How do we move it beyond that?
Well, I think one big advantage we all have is, I think everyone, it's okay to say this, like AI is really cool, right? Like the work we're doing is inherently exciting, is inherently transformational. There is an opportunity to, I think, get people excited about it. To your point, then, how do you build that shared understanding to sort of manage expectations? I think that, to me, that goes back to the importance of education and thinking through the importance of education at every level. So these are good questions to ask. Like, when do we go in front of the board to talk about data, the value of data to the future of the organization, what AI is and where AI is going and why it matters? When do we do that with the other sort of senior executive? And whether that's your conversation to own and then develop that program and go deliver or not, whether that's someone above you, I think asking those questions helps make those things real. But I think without that understanding and appropriate enthusiasm at the top, I think you're right. You will run into those struggles that you talk about.
Yeah, I think a key role that a leader or manager can play. One is removing obstacles and barriers for the team, for sure. But I think another one is being able to see the next step or two coming and proactively communicating upwards, like what's coming. What's this going to take? What should you expect? Business leaders are busy people. They've got a lot of priorities. There's a lot of things going on. I think Chris alluded to dealing with C-suite. It's you can't have a 45-page memo going to the C-suite explaining everything that you know. So you have to condense it. But I think being proactive and really having people with a great understanding of what it's going to take to be successful in an AI endeavor, communicating constantly with them throughout in shorter but more frequent messages, keeping them up to date on stuff. Celebrating wins is really important, but also preparing them for challenges. And when doing that, making it clear to them what they can do to support you. So just telling someone you have a problem is great, but telling them, this is coming and I need support with X, Y, and Z and I'll need your support on this. Can you help me communicate this to the rest of the organization? Is really important. Also, finding the champion for you is really important. So if you have someone at that senior level that's a champion of your work, making really good friends with them, staying connected, really, really important.
Yeah, in the work that we did with interviewing all those companies, one of the other reasons that companies tended to favor upskilling was like it's cheaper, and it's a lot lower risk at sort of the management level. So if you upskill somebody and then they're able to, over the course of the year after they upskill, they can develop a bit of a case study for why AI talent is important to the organization, and then you can bring that up to sort of a more senior level. That was sort of the plan that we heard from a lot of people when we did that research. So that's, I think, kind of step one. And then step two is I think that there needs to be, I really do think that there needs to be an AI plan in your strategic plan for an organization, which will make people at the senior levels and executive levels accountable for making sure that it works. And if they're accountable for it, they're definitely going to be more interested in it rather than things they're not accountable for, which they couldn't give a shit about.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Here's a quick question. For those who want to change their career path, do you think current Canadian alien talent employees are underpaid compared to other fields or other places like the States? And what do you think of the future of the Canadian AI job market?
I think the future of the Canadian AI market is strong. I have no idea what I would pay a data scientist in our company right now, probably what they basically demanded for the talent. I mean, to a point, like I can go back to paper and pen if it's too expensive, but yeah, I think it's very strong. Like, I mean, we're definitely planning for like full-on integration into our company as a matter of business survival. So there will always be a market. But yeah, I don't know. Couldn't begin to imagine what I would pay somebody.
I think, and that market continues to grow, and in Canada we have a number of sectors, where there are a lot of startups, where there is a lot of active AI investment, and whether that's in Edmonton, Montreal, Toronto, there are lots of opportunities in some of our sort of larger metropolitan sectors. But then you can also, the opportunity to sort of work remotely means you don't necessarily need to live where your job is as well. And so with all of Canada open and with lots of what we can clearly see to be active investment in the space of artificial intelligence, I think the future is incredibly bright. It's just how fast can we move? In terms of your question about salaries, you're going to find an incredible range in salaries and expectations about what your day-to-day work life is going to look like across all of those organizations, right? And so where you are in your career, whether that's just starting out or in a more senior position, I think you will have a compelling set of options available to you.
Yeah, I think technologies like remote work are going to drive employers to be competitive on salary. I think most probably are. I think if pay is your only driver, whether that's in Canada or not, you may find somewhere else that's going to pay more than the company you're at right now. But I think it goes back to the total value proposition for the employee. Like, what else other than pay does this company offer? Maybe I want to live in Edmonton because Edmonton's a great city, and if I could get more money, but I got to move to Toronto, well, it's 10 times more expensive to live in Toronto than it is in Edmonton. So how far is your dollar really going? So I think, you have to put together the whole system of factors that drive you when you're looking at that. Pay is going to be important. I think organizations will continue to be competitive in the pay and what they can offer. But I, again, would encourage people to think more broadly about the whole experience that they'll have as an employee and all the benefits that come with working at a particular organization.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the discussion we were having earlier about the importance of, like, as an organization, it's up to you to be able to clearly communicate what your values are and what those benefits, that total benefit of working there is going to look like to data scientists. So I think because that pressure is on the organizations, it'll continue continue to have to get better at it. And so I think that really does, it leaves the data scientist with a lot of degrees of freedom.
Hi. So I participate or partake a lot on all sorts of knowledge and wisdom on the internet, which is Reddit. So there was a really interesting subreddit discussing AI job postings, and there was this job posting that had like skill sets requirements, like must know, must have a lot of data sets solved on Kaggle, must have their own GitHub, must have their, needs to know MLOps, ML, AI, you name the stack, they need to know it. So then there was a conversation about that job post, and one of the posters had a really interesting analogy that they're hiring mercenaries, not recruiting soldiers. So the whole idea is that you don't go and hire a 4-star general to come in and fight your battles. You grow them from within. You hire a lieutenant, and then you grow them internally to be that 4-star general. So any comments on outlandish job postings like that hiring managers put out? Every skill known to man must be present.
Well, and honestly, that's a real trap. Like, or you also forgot like the one where they post for must have 5 years of experience in a package that's only existed for 18 months, right? Like that's another classic. I think if you're on the job market, those are clear red flags, right? Or those are really things to be interrogated actively during the interview. And I think it goes back to some of Chris's points around how serious is this organization about really meaningfully setting up work where a data scientist can come in and drive effective outcomes? Is this really supported by the enterprise, or are they just using a lot of buzzwords? And I think sometimes job postings can fall into a buzzword trap. I know it's very important for an organization to get a handle on the postings for data scientists and to come up with a common expectations about what the skills are and agree to that in a more sort of central fashion. And that's something that I would say when we started at ATB, data science postings went in every which direction. Same job title. In the last 3 years, there's sort of one posting, and we know what it looks like at given levels. So a piece of that may also just be an indicator about like where the organization is in that maturity journey.
Yeah, so it's funny you use the analogy of growing up through the military, having a military background. So I was in that system before, where I was a second lieutenant, a captain, a major. I moved up. There's some advantages to it in the sense that, something the military was so great at was aligning people on a common planning framework or a common way of doing things. Challenges they had, though, people would leave, and then, it was really hard to bring someone in at a higher level. They had to kind of go through the whole system. And you can also experience sort of one way of thinking, one locked-in way of thinking when you do that. I think, experience outside the military is you have to have a bit of a blend of being able to bring people in at the entry level and then strategically bringing in people at other levels that can add to your organization. They bring a different perspective. They have a different experience. Maybe they've just gone through the challenge that your organization is facing in their previous job, and they can help lead that. So I think it needs to be a bit of a blend, not necessarily just growing people from the ground up in an organization. With that being said, though, trying to only hire senior people can be really problematic, very expensive, and then you end up with very, very experienced, seasoned people doing work that someone could be doing with less experience to gain experience and build loyalty in your company. So we follow a leveraged model at KPMG. Most professional services firms would. Kind of like a pyramid. You're going to have more people sort of at the entry level, and then you kind of go up from there, and you try and distribute work down so that people are fully engaged as much as possible. They're doing rewarding work that's sort of at the level of their experience and knowledge. And then you use that as an opportunity to grow people by giving them stretch assignments and moving them up over time.
Yeah, I think this is a real opportunity for everybody in this room with any kind of training in AI, is to be a consultant for companies that are trying to integrate it. Because if you can help them understand what their needs are to fulfill their function, and then tell them exactly what they need in order, like what kind of resources that they need. You might not be the right person for them, but you can help them write a job posting that doesn't end up on Reddit. I think I genuinely think that's an opportunity. If you can learn to market yourself for that, I think you will have customers lining out the door for the next decade.
Okay, so we are just about out of time. I believe our panelists are going to be available if you would like to speak to them further. I think we're going to move into the cafe or the co-working space. So if you'd like to speak with them, that would be great. Let's give them another round of applause. And thank you all so much for being such an attentive audience.